All right. Well, welcome everyone. Tonight is going to be, I think this is number 5 in the series of What to Sing and Chant While Singing and Chanting, which is actually the second part of Orthros. Our speakers, once again, Father John El-Masti and Mr. Greg Abdullah will be starting off. So, Father John, if you could just lead us in a prayer, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Sure. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. O Heavenly King, comfort to the Spirit of truth, who art everywhere present and fill us all things, the treasure of good things and giver of life, come and abide in us and cleanse us from every stain and save our souls, O gracious Lord. Through the prayers of our Holy Fathers, Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. And here's Greg sharing our first light.
Yeah. Hello. Welcome back. We're going to be talking again about the second part of Orthros. Just to recap from last time, Orthros is a morning service, which literally means morning, taking place at sunrise, playing throughout the entirety with this theme of light. It is a combination of the monastic and the city practice and contains elements from the Orologian, Evchologian, Octoichos, Menaian, Triodian, or Pentecostarian, which is another way of saying it has elements from every single liturgical book that you could imagine, with the exception of the epistle book. It even has stuff that comes from the gospel book. We're going to be looking as our case for this coming weekend, Orthros of Sunday, November 1st, which will be in the fourth mode, with the Eothenon being 10, and the hymns from the Menaian specific to the Holy Unmercenaries, Cosmas and Damian, or Agi Anargiri. As we left off last time with ended with Psalm 50, we're now going to look at the very aptly named troparia after Psalm 50, which come right after Psalm 50. These troparia are pretty interesting. So Father John and I were talking, getting ready for yesterday and trying to figure out where they come from. You know, when there's a special feast day, they come from the Menaian. When it's Lent, they come from the Triodian. But these first two hymns, through the intercessions of the apostles, through the intercessions of the Theotokos, and Jesus having risen from the grave, which could be argued comes from the Pentecostarian. The first two hymns, there's a lot of speculation about where they come from. They are found in the Orologian, but their original origin is somewhat unknown. They just kind of appear in an Orologian at one point and then keep being repeated. They have as their focus point this idea of intercession, which is asking the saints to intercede on our behalf, which we are going to see in large part coming right after this section with the section of Orthros that is called the intercessions. In Lent, they take a turn and they focus primarily on repentance, where we sing those beautiful hymns, "Open to me the doors of repentance." When my favorite is the one after "Have mercy upon me." When we see when I the hapless one, like the wretched one, the one that isn't able. I think on the multitude of my sins, which is really following the theme from Psalm 50, the penitential nature that we saw in the psalm. Anything to add, Abuna?
No, great. Just Orologion, reminder that it's the fixed, basically, hymns that we have, the ones that they always don't change, like Gladsome Light, like God is the Lord,
right.
Stuff like we're always going to expect in any Orthros or any Vesper service.
That's yes. With that in mind, these intercessions are the ones that we normally see, with the exception being when there's a major feast or Lent, when they're replaced with the Menaian or the Triodian hymns.
And it's also interesting. I mean, definitely our focus is the Sunday Orthros. But if we are doing a daily Vespers, that there's no gospel reading in it, usually these hymns are not there. So they're actually connected to each other. So if we see a gospel read in Orthros, that means there is, there are these prayers of intercession. If there's no gospel, usually you do not have them. And just whenever you have any of the feast of Christ, instead of through the intercessions of the apostle, there will be another sentence, just usually one sentence, just literally brief, one sentence that connected to the feast itself. And then on Have Mercy on Me, O God, you'll have a longer hymn also to talk about the feast. For the hymns, for the Feast of the Theotokos, usually you have the same one through the intercessions of the Theotokos repeated twice instead of one for the apostle and one for the Theotokos. And then on Have Mercy upon Me, O God, you usually have a hymn, longer hymn, a paragraph in a way, 2-3 sentences around that, about the feast, that particular feast of the Theotokos. But the main thing is the connection between, if there's a gospel, you'll see those hymns. If there's no gospel, you're not going to see these.
And to answer your question, Maya, when they are sung, when these are the ones that are sung through the intercessions of the apostles and of the Theotokos, it doesn't matter what tone the weekly tone is, because these are those fixed hymns, they stay in tone 2. And typically, even the ones that we see in the Menaian are also in tone 2. For whatever reason, it typically stays.
It is in general, well, 100% the glory in both now, they're always in tone 2, regardless what the tone of the week is, regardless what day of the week, regardless what feast. Usually these, not usually, they're always in tone 2. And like Greg said, even hymns for like Christmas, a Nativity of Christ, you'll have one that related about, a sentence about the Nativity of Christ, and you'll see it says in tone 2. The only difference is the Have Mercy on Me is, I would say 95% is in tone 2, whatever the text is, except, 95% is in tone 6, whenever there is a feast of a saint or the Theotokos or Christ. There is one, if I'm not mistaken, the Feast of Dormition. I think Dormition or Nativity of Christ. I need to check. It is in tone 4, for whatever reason. Only to Have Mercy on Me, not because of the tone of the week, not because of anything. It just happened that this hymn is in tone 4. But in general, Have Mercy on Me for major feasts, for saints and the Theotokos and Christ, they're usually in tone 6. But Glory both now 100% are in tone 2, regardless of the tone of the week or whatever it is.
And then when we get to the Lenten hymns of repentance, the first 2 are in tone 8, with the third one being in tone 6, or second, plagal 6.
Yes. So yes, Sarah. Whenever there's a feast of Christ or the Theotokos or a major one, a major feast, and we're not singing Jesus having risen from the grave, and it's replaced by like a longer paragraph about the feast celebrated. Yes, it is usually chanted in the stichiatic style, more like not as fast as through the intercession is usually sung. Even, I don't want to go very because once we open the door, it's like, where do we stop? Usually on Sundays, the text that we're looking at, usually they're sung in the etymologic style. It's like pop, 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 syllabic style. Usually whenever you have a feast of the Master or feast for the Theotokos, or at least feast of Christ, instead of through the intercession, like I said, you will be like one sentence about the feast. It is usually in the stichiatic style, but it's like the beat of it is faster. It's not like you take your time and it's embellished. It's just I would say it's a little bit, or it's what would be the word? Embellished etymologic style, if I can say. So it's not quite stichiatic, but it's not etymologic. It's like kind of in between. There are some ornamentation, but not as much as. But usually, Have Mercy upon Me for a feast, regardless Theotokos or Christ, it is usually embellished like a stichiatic style.
Great. Yes, They are from Gerald. They are from the Orologian.
Those fixed hymns. Usually the Orologian always contains those hymns that we know we're going to sing them every time. Like I said, just the exception if there is a gospel or no, but it would still mention in the Orologian.
Right. Following these hymns, we see the long intercession prayers. O God, save thy people and bless thine inheritance. Visit the world with mercy and compassion. Exalt the horde, Orthodox Christians. Send down thy rich mercy. Then through the intercessions, and it goes through a listing of a wide variety of saints. This mainly comes from the Evhologian, with the saints of the day being inserted from the Menaian. You may also see at different points local veneration of saints, which is done at the discretion of the pastor or at the discretion of the bishop. For example, there was a time when Saint Raphael was not commemorated, and then after his glorification, it became common that people were commemorating him during the intercessions. And then at one point, I believe it was during Saint Philip's tenure, he said, add Saint Raphael into the listing. And whenever that happens, you see those saints listed under the same, we'll use the word category or classification. If you see at the very bottom of the page, the footnote of the other saints that are there. And these typically are the same classifications or categories that we see during the proskimidi. So whenever the gifts are being prepared, there are 9 little triangles that are prepared for the different ranks or classes of saints, and those are mirrored here in this intercession, by and large. Anything to add, Abuna?
Greg, just a reminder of what you told me even yesterday. It would be a good example to talk about, like if you have the relics of Saint so-and-so.
Oh, yes. The reason that you might have those saints of particular local veneration, thank you, Abuna, is, like in our parish here at St. George, we have the relics of St. Thecla in our altar table. She's already included in the intercession, so we wouldn't necessarily add her. Say, for example, though, we had the relics of St. Herman of Alaska. We would maybe, because of his special local veneration or closeness that the parish feels as he is one of the saints who is here, having his relics here, we would add him into the intercession, and he would go into the proper category, probably with the God-bearing fathers who shone in the ascetic life, because he was a hermit living in Alaska.
Yeah.
Practically speaking, Chris, I don't know what Abuna's thoughts are. I think, yes, it is appropriate. We do that here at St. George in Phoenix, where we sing the 12 Lord have mercies quietly while the intercession is going on. But not everyone likes that practice. So for the other side of the argument, I now will turn things over to Father John.
Well, it's not like, I mean, in the end of the day, I won't say it's not like I don't, it doesn't matter. Or, I mean, it's not like, well, one is right and one is wrong. But, we like to, look at what is generally done, what is, traditionally done. And we try to see why this new thing just somehow came up. You know what I mean? Like, why are we doing these things? I usually don't like when we do things just because they're cool, just because it's like, oh, wow, that looks nice. That sounds good. Let's do it. I mean, it's okay if you overlap, but it's not like something commonly done. And I really believe that the reason why this thing came out, like where people like to start, overlapping and do the 12, the 12 times in tone 5, especially in tone 5. It's like all of a sudden, like Kyrie eleison, or Lord have mercy, Lord, and then it's like, oh, it's like, look how cute it's, fine, but like I truly believe a few years ago a CD came out from either the Vatopedi Monastery or Simonopetra. I don't know exactly which one. And in it, they do that. But it wasn't like something that, I'm pretty sure it's not like something done commonly in other monasteries on Mount Athos. But because people got a hold of the CD and it became like, oh, that's something cool to do. So they started doing these things and, doing it like, overlapping and do it. But honestly, I'm not a fan. It's not like, I look forward to do it, the overlapping thing. I just listen to the, the petitions, and then I'll do it just, the 12 times. Then whatever tone you want to do. Usually it's done in tone 2. Now I'm trying to think while we do have one place we overlap when we do what's called the artoclasia. We talked a little bit about it in the Vespers part, where one of the petitions we have to say, Lord have mercy 40 times. And the reason we say the 40 times, not just the 3 times, because in this specific petition, we're talking about like really bad things happening, like to God to save us from maladies, from earthquakes, from sicknesses, all these, like, so we're asking
Civil
more.
War.
What is it?
Civil War.
Civil War, exactly.
Foreign invasion and sudden death.
Exactly, all of these things. So it's like, yes, we need to pray a little bit more. That's the only place, so we don't take too much time between the petitions of singing 40 times, between 2 petitions. So they start doing the 40, and usually it's done like, Lord have mercy, 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 10 times, and then bum, 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 10 more and 10 more and 10 more. That's the only place kind of we see overlapping, and just because it's 40 times. There is no reason to overlap 12 Lord have mercies in the middle of just like naming names of saints. You know what I mean? Just leave it to the end. But again, it's not the end of the world if you do that. Or, oh my God, like God forbid it's something wrong, or salvation. Your salvation is based on if you say it or you don't. God forbid. But that's my take on this.
So the answer, Chris, is yes. Can you do it or not do it? The answer is yes.
Well, obviously, like I said, that's the beauty in Orthodoxy. Some things, we might like, some other people might not like, but it's all appropriate,
And all should be done with the discretion and discussion with your pastor, because if you start doing it randomly one Sunday and they come out to you and say, what were you doing? You did not hear that from here.
But at least I can say, I didn't push for it,
Yeah.
I'll tell them it's Greg's fault, he thought.
Yeah, it's all on me. It's fine. Next, following this, we see the Kontakion, Ekos, and Synaxarion. These are something that kind of is an anomaly with the way, like we've talked in the past about Orthros. If we were to do the full Orthros service, we would be there for about 3 hours. And what we do is an abbreviation. As part of that abbreviation, sometimes things get kind of moved and displaced a little bit from where they would normally be. Typically, if we were going to do the full canon, which we'll talk about in a moment, following the 6th ode of the canon, you would see the Kontakios and Ekos read, and you might have a very brief Synaxarion which mentions the different saints commemorated that day. In our practice in the Antiochian Archdiocese of North America, this Kontakion and Ekos and Synaxarion have been moved. The Kontakion and the Ekos come from the canon for the mode of that week, while the Synaxarion is particular to the saints being commemorated in that day. Usually just a little bit about their lives, something we hear about. Anything you'd like to add, Abuna, on the Kontakion?
So the Kontakion and Ekos, it's by itself, it's a whole service, and I don't want to we don't need to open it for too long on this point, but just a reminder, most of us probably been to Akathis service during Lent, on Fridays during Lent, and we do have this. We kind of see like 2 parts of this service. One part where the chanters are just like, the choir singing a whole, usually I shall open my mouth, and then a bunch of hymns in between the katavasiyas, regular ones that we sing every week. But then there's the second part where the priest comes out, stands in front of the icon, and tends to the icon, and then he goes, hail or rejoice, and a bunch of hymns that they repeated. This second part is actually what is a full kontakion. It's just those, like the ones that we sing every Friday during Lent. The second part, those things that the priest does, this is actually a full kontakion. And there was a whole thing like this for every single tone. The ones that we sing for akathist is like, it is for the akathist. It was basically, I'm sorry, I just read the questions while I should have done that because I lost my thought. Anyway, the point is, the akathist, the kontakion that we sing for the akathist is basically taken from Christmas and Annunciation, hymns related to the Theotokos, basically. But we have one set of those hymns, like the one for akathist, for all of the tones. And before, to answer the question, they were all chanted. All these kontakion, it will be kontakion for tone 1, chanted in tone 1. Kontakion for tone 2, chanted in tone 2. All of these things. And what we have in front of us here, if you see, now hath my deliverer and mighty Savior raised the earthborn from the grave, is the main hymn that we just kept and we use only now, the main hymn of this kontakion, whole part of it that we have like in the akathist. It's basically this hymn, now hath my deliverer and mighty Savior raised, is equivalent to thee, the champion leader, which is the most important part in the akathist service, and that second part of the akathist service. So we basically, the church kind of like deleted or got rid of all the other hymns and only kept using for Sundays the main hymn for the kontakion, or the main two hymns, which now for tone 4 there, now hath my deliverer and mighty Savior, and let us the earthborn all praise Christ. Maybe, yes. Thank you. And so the question, why is it in tone, if it says plain reading, why does it mention tone 4? It just, because it is actually, it was always done in, like I said, it is chanted in the tone of the week, because every week has its own kontakion. But nowadays we just read them. There is no reason to chant them, so we do not chant them. We just do plain reading. And if you notice, a lot of the churches, actually, the ending of both of these two hymns, they kind of, they are similar. And see how it says, and is arisen on the third day as sovereign Lord. He is arisen on the third day as sovereign Lord. Well, it's like exactly how we have in the akathist service, to be the champion leader, which the main refrain is what? Rejoice, O bride unwedded, or rejoice, O unwedded bride. So one of the key things about the kontakion is usually has the same ending for each of the like the hymns of this kontakion. And of course, the father of the kontakion or kontakia is Saint Romanos. He is known written around, I think, 95 of them, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I should be
something
more,
like that.
Something around this, but we don't have many left. Or I don't know if we only have 95 out of how many is written. But that's why in some churches we see, after somebody reads the kontakion in the Ikos, somebody just repeat in intonation the repeated part. So, now hath my deliverer, yada yada, and he hath crushed Hades, brazen gates, and is arisen on the third day as sovereign Lord. And somebody you might hear going like, and is arisen on the third day as sovereign Lord. Same thing with let us the earthborn all praise Christ. For as the only mighty God, he is arisen on the third day as sovereign Lord, and somebody else will, or the choir joins in and says, he is arisen on the third day as sovereign Lord. And this thing is just like trying to imitate what we do in the akathist service, or what are we supposed to do when we have a full kontakion read or chanted, how the priest, when he says at the end, rejoice, O unwedded bride, and then the choir repeats it. That's kind of like the same concept. So we kind of like, nowadays we try to do some of the stuff that, usually done at a full when you're chanting when you're chanting a full kontakion.
The other thing to keep in mind too, this is different than the kontakion that we sing at Divine Liturgy, which we'll see in a couple weeks how we figure out which kontakion to sing at Divine Liturgy. Occasionally you might see it be the same, but the kontakion that we sing at Divine Liturgy is usually from a different hymn, and that is determined by what season we're in at that period of time based on when certain feasts have. And then we have, of course, what we call the ordinary kontakion,
Sure.
which
And
is
just to
protection
add,
of Christians.
yeah, just to add to Greg, it's only except when we have a feast of the Lord or the Theotokos, where on that feast you will read the same kontakion.
Right.
Whatever you read here, instead of "Now hath my deliverer," you'll read it. You'll chant it again in liturgy. And Chris, to answer your question, is it odd for the same chanter to read the kontakion and then repeat the refrain himself? I would say yes, it is odd. I would say if you're by yourself, just read the thing and that's it. You don't need to repeat. There's no point of repeating it. I think it's like, we just, with the time, there are a lot of practices that there's no point of doing them. Anyway, regardless if you're by yourself or there are 20 people who can answer, repeat it. But I would say when you're by yourself, just on the third day as sovereign Lord, period, let us, the earthborn, all praise Christ. After you finish that, jump right away to the Synexanion, and there's no reason to repeat it.
Great. Following this, we get into the canon. And the canon...
But hold on, we didn't talk about the Synexarion. Did you talk about the Synexarion?
That it's the life of the saint. We can talk more about it.
I just want to mention one thing about it, that only in the Antiochian Archdiocese here in America that we read the whole life of the saint in a way. Usually what you see in traditional way is just to literally read on November 1st or whatever the day is. The Holy Orthodox Church commemorate the holy whoever the saint. You might just say the verse, the two unmercenaries from earth departed, when you get to O healing light, and then right away you go by the last line, by their intercession, O Christ God, have mercy upon us, amen. But His Eminence wanted to give an opportunity to people to listen to the life of the saint and read more about it. That is definitely, especially it's coming from the Metropolitan, that is totally his right, and to add stuff like this that no one can should not, would never question. But I just want to also let you know that it's not, if you go to a Greek church, you're not going to hear this. Even if you go to an Antiochian church in the old country, or you're just not going to hear this. It is just a local practice that was done. Is it wrong? Definitely not wrong, especially that it's coming from the Metropolitan, period, but it's not something common done in other Byzantine churches or in other Antiochian archdioceses outside of, again, except us here in America.
Excellent.
Yes. Now we can go if you want to. Can. Thank you.
I'm just so excited about the canon. I love the canon.
Like he likes the missiles coming out of the bombing.
The cannonball, yeah, it's like boom.
It's exactly cannonball.
So right around the very the heart of Orthros, we come to this beautiful work of poetry called the canon or the Katavasias. And these typically come either from the Oktoikos. They have one in each of the 8 modes. In our archdiocese, we use the ones that are seasonal, so coming from either the Manean, Triodian, or Pentecostarian, while you might see in other jurisdictions in America, like for example in the OCA, they use the canons that come from the Oktoikos each week based on the tone of the week. Sometimes you'll even see in the OCA a double canon, where they're using the canon for the season or the feast, but also that of the tone of the week. These are, as I just said, seasonally used throughout the year. We sing for the Dormition for a few weeks leading up to the Dormition and a week after, and then we go back to singing for the cross. Then anyway, we get into the canon of the Akathist, which kind of becomes like our home base. we go to the canon of Christmas with a little excursus into the presentation of the Theotokos, and so on and so on. Most of the canons that we have were written by St. John of Damascus or by his brother, St. Cosmas. Between the two of them, they wrote canons for all of the major feasts, with the exception of Pascha. You'll see almost always two canons, one by John and one by Cosmas, his adopted brother. The exception is Pascha, where John read Cosmas's transcript and said there's nothing else to say. As Father John mentioned earlier, these often go hand in hand with these Cantacia, many of which were written by Saint Romanos, the father of the Cantacian. We have John of Damascus, the father of the canon. These often express the theme of the feast through the lens of Scripture, with each of the odes, there is a biblical canticle, which we're going to see in a minute, that was typically read just before. The same way that we see today, on a normal Sunday, we hear the singing of More Honorable with the verses, followed by the singing of the ninth ode. That singing of More Honorable with the verses, that comes from the biblical canticles. So it's almost kind of like the last vestige that we have of the use of those biblical canticles. The most famous canons are probably the canon of the Akathist, where we see in toto the entirety of the canon. What we sing on Sundays is typically what is called just the Katavasias, which is that first hymn to kind of get you in the mood. And then you have all these other hymns that get more in depth into the feast, as we see during the singing of the Akathist hymn, or during the beginning of Great Lent in the canon of St. Andrew of Crete. Or also you would see at the canon for Paraclesis. Anything to add, Amuna?
No, I mean, no, we don't need to go more in details unless people have questions or anything. But
so looking at this chart, we see that we have 9 odes, but we skip number 2. Number 2 was a second ode of Moses called the Song of Moses, also coming from Exodus. But they were dropped off because of kind of the themes that were going, didn't always go very nicely. And so they eventually stopped being used as often. So we see it goes ode 1, ode 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. As on the left, you see the text for the canon of the Akathist. On the right, you see the canon of the cross. You see these themes coming from in the middle throughout. You'll also see it during Christmas. You'll see it during Theophany. You'll see it during Pentecost. You see it during Pascha. These hymns like come and go all the way through, where it's going back to this prayer of Anna, the Ode of Moses, prayer of Habakkuk, the prayer of Isaiah, Jonah, the three holy children, finally culminating in the Magnificat, my soul doth magnify the Lord, the words of the Theotokos.
it's a relationship. The canons are to shed light about the relationship of the Old Testament with the New Testament in the end, and all these figures and events that happened in the Old Testament overshadowing the Christ and his being present also in the Old Testament. It wasn't just the
Right.
New Testament. And it's a beautiful imagery where how in it amazes me how, like, the one for the sixth ode for Jonah, it's like Jonah being in the belly. So for Christmas, we look at it as if like Christ is in the belly, of the Theotokos in a way, in her, inside of the Theotokos. But for Pascha, well, it's like Christ inside of, inside of the tomb, So it's like, it's just beautiful how we see these, imagery, and how is, like, I don't know. I mean, it's the intelligence of Saint John, poetry, and the intelligence of Saint John of Damascus, especially, to put all these together, and him being actually considered the first one who started incorporating, chant with the theology, or teaching theology and doctrines through hymnography. It's amazing. Nobody has that. If you look at now at any Christian, churches, nobody does that the way we do it.
Right.
Just by you learn your faith just by listening to chant. You can literally learn 80% at least of your, the teachings of the church just by listening or being at the chant stand. They're just beautiful.
Yeah. That's why we call them hymns. We don't just refer to them as songs. They're
Yeah.
teaching us through their words. And John of Damascus was the first systematic theologian. So for him to take all of that and then start putting it into hymnography was phenomenal.
So didn't we do the second ode of a canon at a winter SMI? Second ode usually never done outside of Lent during the Triodion and Orthros services in the Triodion. They usually have this lament, like this penitential feeling. And because on Sundays and major feast of Christ and the Theotokos and all of these, they're kind of like a celebratory theme, and that's the reason we omit the second ode. You're only going to see second ode used, like I said, in daily Orthros during Lent, daily Lenten Orthros. When it's Triodion, literally means the 3 odes, where instead of singing 9 odes in total, you're only singing only 3. You might have different canons, one for the day and one for the saint celebrated, and one depending on the tone, and one for the tone, one for the saint, and one for whichever week you're in during Lent. But you're still going to sing 3 odes only out of the 9, and one of them usually, or it can be one from the second ode. Okay? And what else? Is the biblical canticle always the same every week? Greg?
So we don't read the biblical canticles anymore, but the biblical canticles were, what's that?
They are the same. I mean, there's one called
but
for
they're
Monday.
The same.
Yes. I mean, there are exactly the specific readings, and like how Greg said, put them in the middle. There's one for Monday, Tuesday, So usually on Monday, you're going to do the canticle, like the specific canticles, like for Monday. Tuesday, you're going to do ones for Tuesday, for Wednesday, for Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, all of these. But on Sunday, you'll see this kind of like this whole thing of, I don't know if they were read before also.
Yes. They used to precede the canon. They used to, so it used to be just like we see, my soul doth magnify the Lord with more honorable, followed by the 9th ode. Each of those odes used to have the reading of the biblical canticle that would then precede the singing of the Catavasias and the canon that followed. Now we don't have the biblical canticles read, so it wasn't just that they were the same every week. These are the biblical canticles that go for canons. So whatever canon you're looking at, Ode 1 is going to talk about Moses and the cross being inscribed with his rod and the people crossing the Red Sea. Just like you're going to always hear Habakkuk mentioned during the 4th, and stuff coming from the Song of Samuel, or from the Book of Samuel, the prayer of Anna in the 3rd, and from the prayer of Isaiah coming up in the 5th. Jonah is referenced all over the place in that 6th ode because of his prefiguring of Christ's resurrection. In the cross, it talks about his hands being stretched forth in the form of the cross. In the canon for Pascha, the 6th ode talks about Jonah being in the belly of the sea monster for 3 days, just like Christ was in the tomb. So it's all the way through. Same with Ode 7 and 8, you're always going to hear about the 3 holy children. And Ode 9 is always about the Theotokos, which then often becomes the Meglanarion that we sing for those feast days.
Yeah. I mean, you will see a much fuller Orthros, especially when it comes to these canticles during Lent. Like we always say, during Lent, everything kind of comes out. Like we don't want to, we want to make sure that the service still, or gets longer, just, so we can pray more or whatever. So you'll see how usually I never actually looked online if Peter has daily Lenten. I think no, he has actually instructions how to do them. But anyway, you'll see. Usually, you would read actually the canticle itself. So you read. I don't know the days exactly, but like let's say on Monday, you're going to read actually the Ode of Moses, Exodus 15, 1-9. You're going to read them before you start chanting the canons, or in between the canons. There's a whole complicated things with the canticles, but they've always been part from the beginning. And actually, the canons always considered the canon as the backbone of Orthros. The canons, but nowadays, unfortunately, we kind of we trimmed a lot of it, and we only have, like Greg says in the beginning, the main hymn that we sing, like "I shall open my mouth," the godly-minded children. It's the main hymn of each ode, or of each part of the whole canon. We just took the main hymn of each ode, and we just. But look at the Akathist service. When we sing the Akathist service, the first part of the Akathist service is "I shall open my mouth," and then usually there are a bunch of hymns. Technically, they should be even musically metered after the first ode.
Right.
A bunch of them, and then you'll sing the second one as a living and copious fountain, and then a bunch of hymns metered have the same music as a living and copious fountain, and then same thing for 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, and 9. But what we did outside of Lent, we just got rid of all of these, and we only kept the main hymn of
Right.
Are the odes supposed to be sung by one person, 2 or 3 people can alternate? I would say this is just a general rule. Solo chanting in the Byzantine tradition is not something common to do. It's just not. Everything was written, in music, or I can say 90% of the stuff were written into music. Everything is written in music. For 90% of it to be chanted as chorally, as a choir. Whenever there are music, people should chant as a choir, not individually. And we'll see through history that there are specific places in specific hymns, in specific places in the hymn, where it's called for one person just to shed light on this specific word or specific sentence where he or she is expected to do it solo, as a soloist. But in general, everything should be chanted chorally. You tell me we don't have music for these, fine, then there's no way you can have 2 people singing at the same time trying to come up with the music on the spot, basically composing music. There's no way they can be, composing the same thing on the spot. But if you don't have music, of course, you'll have to alternate. But I think it's one of the worst things you would do when you have music and you decide you're still going to do, and if everybody can read music, of course, and you're still going to do individual chanting. I think that's one of the worst things ever you would do. And it goes against anything that you see in the history of Byzantine chant. And I've talked about, on the Winter SMI, I've talked about because the church had to have one chanter only, one on the left and one on the right, or just one chanter, it's because they couldn't afford anymore supporting, multiple people at the chant stand because of taxation, because of the Ottoman Empire. And people could not spend time learning music and stuff because of, again, being taxed and, the way they had to take care of the, meat or how do you say this? Basically come up with food on the table for their families. So that's why the church went to have one chanter singing. And nowadays we see this, especially in the United States, that this thing where, because we inherited from the old country too, you have 4 or 5 people at the chant stand and they just take turns, one at a time. And that's, I think, there's no reason for it, unless, unfortunately, they don't learn how to read music and stuff. But I think the worst thing people can ever do, especially if they can't read music, that they don't sing chorally. I think I made it clear, because that's not what's called for. If we have music and people can read music, they should sing everything they can chorally, period.
It's like the Beatles said, all together now.
Oh, for Sarah, we can talk more about this at the end. Any tips on how to increase attendance and Orthros? We'll leave it to the end if you don't mind. because it's definitely an important thing. But we can just talk about it like this is kind of more like pastorally, I think. And,
Yeah.
okay, but Sarah, if you don't mind, we'll leave it to the end.
Following the ninth ode and the singing of the Ketavasias or the canon, we come to the hymn called the Exapostolarian. This is named because of the frequent use of the word exapostelon, which means to send out, coupled with the theme of light, bringing the light. We're sent out into the world to bring the light that Christ has shown to us, which the disciples beheld in those Eothina, in those gospel readings that we talked about last week, that are all tied to the post-resurrectional appearances of Christ. Now the apostles are sent out, having seen that light, to bring that to the world around them. We might also say exapostolaria and Theotokia for the Menaion, for the specific commemoration of that day. Even though these don't always use that same theme of being sent out coupled with light, they are given that same name so that we understand where in the service to put them. Essentially, we need to know where things go and have everything in good order. Anything, Abuna?
No, beautiful, beautiful. Usually they're metered, as like you see under it says upon that mountain Galilee, or in the next one you'll see while standing in the temple's courts. You'll see them in italics, and usually 99% of these, well, actually 100%. I don't need to say 99. They follow a specific melody. So if you know the melody of "Upon That Mountain Galilee," you can actually apply it on the text that you see here in front of us on the Sea of Tiberias. Also, I'm sorry, Greg, if I missed. I don't know if I heard you saying this, but these exapostolaria are related to the Gospel Eothinon.
Right.
That is, so the 10th Eothinon, you see there, it is related, it's the same, it's just an explanation on the Gospel, the 10th Eothinon Gospel that we read a few minutes before that. And same thing with the Theotokos. I mean, in this case here, Exapostolarum and Theotokion for the unmercenaries. If we did not have the Feast of the Unmercenaries, it was just a regular Sunday, we would have chanted one for the Theotokos, but also related to the 10th Eothinon. So
right.
Every Eothinon has, the Exapostolarium for the Eothinon. For each one of the 11th, there's one main one and one Theotokion one. Okay? But whenever there's a feast of the saint, it happened now at this coming Sunday that we have the feast of Saint Cosmas, and Damien, and it's called for their Exapostolarium to be chanted. So we're going to chant the Theotokion, the Exapostolarium, Theotokion related to the feast of these things. Instead of the one for the 11, one of the 11, instead of the one for the 10th Eothinon.
Perfect.
It just, again, there's a lot of, I don't know why in the end of the church, in the end of the day, why the church, there are very complicated things in how to put service together,
It makes it so much fun.
It is, but it's very complicated, but it's all to respect and give the right respect to each of the feasts, and not like to one to be overtaken or overpowered by one. Except, of course, when there's a feast of Christ, only Christ, period. Because in the end, he's the goal, regardless, for St. Cosmas of Damien or whatever. I mean, we intercede and we pray for all these saints, knowing in the end of the day, it's all, so they can intercede for us for Christ, period, But it's beautiful how we put all these things together in the end, as much as I complain sometimes how complicated they are. But it's just to pay the right respect for each part of, for the saints, for the feast celebrated and stuff. Yes.
Following the Exapostolaria, we sing what we call the praises. You may also hear them referred to or see them listed as the Aini. These are open with Psalm 148, or the words from Psalm 148. Let everything that hath breath praise the Lord from the heavens, praise him in the heights. To thee, O God, is due a song. Praise him, all his angels. Praise him, all his hosts. To thee, O God, is due our song. Following, we see stichira interspersed with verses from Psalms 148 and 149. These hymns this is done similar to the Lord I Have Cried at Vespers, like we talked about way back, like 8 weeks ago. These are mainly coming from the Orthros and the Menaian. They also will come from the Triodian or Pentecostarian, depending on the season. For this coming Sunday, we have, we see the 4 that are in tone 4. There are always 8 at the praises. So in this situation, we would see either 4 for the resurrection, or as we saw this past Sunday, we saw 8 for the resurrection. For this coming Sunday, we see 4 for the resurrection, and then 4 for Cosmas and Damien, 2 of them in tone 1, 2 of them in tone 2. And these hymns, tell us about what's going on. Anything to add, Abuna?
Like Greg said, they're usually 8, and I like how he put similar to Lord I Have Cried at Vespers. It's had the same concept, like let everything that has breath, basically like, oh Lord I Have Cried, praise ye him, all ye his angels, is like let my prayer arise. The only difference is, which we stopped doing for the praises. Anyway, usually, again, if we're going to go back to do a full Orthros service, you would insert the whole psalm in between. You do the verses the same way you're doing the whole verses at Vespers of Saddle Watch, O Lord, before my mouth. But with the days, we're like, okay, we'll keep those at Vespers, but for Orthros, we're not gonna keep going with the Psalms 148 and 149, and we only kept those hymns. Why 8? I honestly don't know why only 8. Most likely, somebody just wrote 8 of them. That's how he or she came out. One of our saints came out with that many. And then they regulated them that they're all going to be 8 for all the 8 tones. Maybe because of 8 tones, I don't know. But only on Sunday that we see 10. 8 hymns chanted for major feasts for Christ. If we're doing Orthros outside of Sunday, even if it's for a feast of Christ or the Theotokos, usually we have 4 only. Right. And usually some feasts they're repeated, some feasts they're not, just 4 of them. You're only doing 4 instead of 8. Other than, in this case here we have, 4 for the resurrection, and it's called for 4 for St. Cosmas and Damien. Usually you'll see them, usually if it's for a specific saint that we're singing the praises, usually it's in the same tone. Here we see something a little bit different, that it says tone 1 and then we switch to tone 2. One of the reasons, or one of the main reasons why that is, because most likely a couple different people wrote about this the saint with these hymns, and then when the church put them together, or put the service for that saint, they liked both what was written from both composers, and then they included them. And one decided to write in tone 1, and the other one decided to write in tone 2. But usually we see them in the same tone. Whenever we're singing the praises for a specific saint or feast, this is not normal to see them in 2 tones, 2 different tones for the same saint.
Excellent.
Okay. And usually for saints, they are metered. They have a specific melody to follow, but some don't. That's not a rule that they have to be metered or not.
So following the praises, just like we have a doxasticon at Lord I Have Cried of Vespers, which, as we talked about, is often called the dogmaticon. At Orthros, we have the doxasticon that is coming from the Eothena. So just like the Exapostolarian takes those themes that we hear in the gospel from the Eothena, on most Sundays, we will see the doxasticon being also tied to those Eothena, talking about that same passage and bringing it out. These sometimes do come from the Menaian for specific feasts, especially feasts of Christ. If it was Orthros during the week, this doxasticon would come from the Menaian. and is, like I said, a summary of kind of the day's themes. In other words, it is, I kind of like to think of it as almost like a synopsis of what's going on for that specific day. So, for example, on Sunday, it's going to be the 10th Eothina. So we will hear the Doxasticon summarizing everything that has already been taught to us in the gospel message as a way to further teach us what is going on. When the Doxasticon, outside of the Paschal season, when the Doxasticon is over, we sing it with the both now and ever and unto ages of ages, amen, and the most blessed art thou, Virgin Theotokos, which is the standard now and ever. Typically, this is sung in a at a more in the Irmologic style rather than in the Stichiraric style that we would see for the Doxasticon.
Sure. And it's usually, if I can, I think we have time to, it's usually, I mean, if we pay attention carefully, where this one is chanted usually, we know most blessed art thou, O Virgin Theotokos, is actually one of the kathisma for tone 2. So next time there's tone 2, it's the week of tone 2 on Sunday, pay attention in Orthros that it says plain reading. It's the both now and ever. I'm pretty sure it's the first kathisma. If you remember, we said the kathisma ta'ar. We have 2 sets of 3 hymns for each mode, usually chanted, always chanted after God is the Lord, the petition after God is the Lord. But if you pay attention, the same one here, most blessed art thou, is actually taken from the tone 2 kathisma, the first kathisma, if I'm not mistaken. And if anybody knows more, you can correct me. It's the both now of that. But it's also chanted every single Sunday when there's nothing much, happening. It's not much, like no Feast of Christ or the Theotokos on that day. And we see it, always chanted. That's why, in general, this one should be chanted in tone 2. Okay? If it's the second, maybe it's the second kathisma. I mean, I can look. But anyway, it's coming from Orthros of tone 2, kathisma of tone 2. Usually it's chanted in tone 2. So technically, you have the 10th Eothina, it happened here in tone 6. You're going to sing this stichirarically in tone 6. Then you're going to switch to tone 2. And then, actually, Greg in a second is going to talk about the doxology. Usually the doxology, it is to be chanted of the tone of the week. So, so the tone of the week for this coming Sunday is what? Is tone 4. So it is 6 for the glory, tone 2 for both now, and then the doxology in tone 4. That's the typical thing to do. But, not every church has accomplished chanters, or people can switch, easily between all these modes. So the practice became that, okay, whatever the doxa is, tone 6, okay, we're going to do the both now in tone 6 and the doxology in tone 6. Of course, there's nothing wrong at all with this. But don't be surprised if you hear sometimes people switching the tone of both now to tone 2 and then switching the doxology to a different tone. And the reason they do, I mean, some churches anyway, they, God bless them, they only know to chant the doxology in tone 8, So nothing wrong with that at all. Growing up, that's what we did. I sang tone 8. I knew it by heart big time because this is what we sang on Sunday, tone 8, doxology. But I'm just telling you what is more traditionally done is the glory, whatever tone, both now is in tone 2, and then the doxology is in the tone of the week. Okay, here we keep it tone 6, just so we don't want to complicate things for people and right. Feel like they have to learn how to switch between these tones and might cause trouble. And so we decided just keep everything, trying to keep it the same tone as the glory. So, not a lot of work to be done.
And we see this as the great doxology, kind of like the culmination of Orthros, really taking that theme of light that is what's going on in Orthros in general and bringing it to its fruition. And this is, as Father John said, typically sung in the same mode as the Doxasticon. You might even see some people that will sing the Troparion following the doxology in the same mode as the doxology. you might see that happening as well. And this really is just one of my favorites. My favorite hymns, really. It comes from the Orologian and is one of those fixed hymns. You even see it in a what we call the small doxology during the daily Orthros. But it's important that this doxology, this prayer, is included in an Orthros service. Oops.
Yeah. To answer Sarah, they are actually in tone 4 and tone 8. That's how they are. They're written in tone 4 and tone 8. And the point is, usually if you have the tone of the week 1 to 4, you're going to sing the tone 4 one. And whenever you have hymns or the tone of the week 5 to 8, you're going to do one in tone 8, as if like the ending, the ending tone, if I can say. I don't know if they show up somewhere else, actually. I don't know if today's salvation coming to the world comes from a different service somehow, or, if they come from a specific, like say, Compline or another midnight service or something. I don't know if they show up anywhere else. Charlie asked why Kazan has them in 8 tones. Yes, there is this, like Greg says, a lot of people now what they do, they're just like, whatever the glory is, the tone of the glory, both now, same thing, the doxology, today's salvation, or whatever hymn is called for, they just do it in the same tone. And also it is a practice also on Mount Athos. Some of the monasteries, they wrote, although in a way, God bless them, but that's what they did. And people now with the technologies and all of these things, they see these things and they, copy them. It's like, oh, it's done on Mount Athos, we need to do it, But anyway, so they've written all of these in all 8 modes, knowing now that everybody's kind of like keeping the same, or a lot of churches, they're just keeping the same tone for everything because they have difficulty switching between tones. So might as well write today's salvation all 4 modes, or, or 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know if Kazan wrote today's salvation coming to the world in all 8 modes or just 1 to 4.
I think he wrote each of them in all 8 modes because, like, if you have the tone of the week, like for this week is tone 4, the doxasticon is in tone 6, the doxology is in tone 6. So then at the end of the doxology in tone 6, he has both hymns in 6th mode.
Kazan has tones 1 to 4 with today's salvation. In the end of the day, I don't know. If you can, in the end of the day, the goal, how can we make ourselves, better? If we can learn all of these things and can switch the tone, totally fine. Let's do that. We are, we should do that. We should work on this. But some people don't have the chance or they don't have the time. Understandable, and then they have to do whatever they, it makes it easier for them. But honestly, not because, it says honestly if I'm chanting, it says here the great doxology in tone 6. I'm not going to do it in tone 6. It's not like, God forbid, I'm going against the teaching of the church or something. I'm going to do it in tone 4 because it's the tone of the week. I can do that. If I have a choir, if they can, if I have a choir, I need to see if the choir can do it or no. If they cannot do it, then okay, fine, we'll do everything in the same tone. But if I can do it, why not? If we can do it, why not? Do properly what it's called for. In tones 5 to 8 for having risen from the tomb. Yeah. So just to make it easier on the chanters to do that. Yeah. And again, they did it on Mount Athos, and kind of spilled to all the other parishes, like other churches. Why not?
St. Anthony's has them in all 8 modes, I think.
Yeah, because St. Anthony's it's
Athonite.
Athonite, exactly. So they try to meet it. Follow everything what it's done on Mount Athos.
So to summarize everything, the totality of Orthros, we have fixed content, and then we're going to look at the unfixed content next. The fixed content, I can't remember what the heading was, so I called it unfixed. The fixed content, we see that the fixed hymns that are always in this mode are the Evlogataria are always in tone 5. Let everything is always in tone 2. Psalm 50, it would, if it's chanted, is always in tone 2. The Triparia after in tone 2. Holy is the Lord our God is in tone 2. Both now and ever, most blessed art thou is in tone 2. The fixed hymns, whose mode matches that of the week, Our God is the Lord, Let everything that hath breath, and the subsequent Praise ye him, and the great doxology. Now you may see variation in the doxology and the both now and ever, most blessed art thou, based on the doxasticon and the tone of the doxasticon, with the exceptions being today is salvation come into the world, which is in tone 4, when the tone of the week is 1 through 4, and having risen from the tomb is in tone 8, when the tone of the week is 5 through 8. These are just kind of this is your quick guide to see what's happening with Orthros. Next, we have the variable content, or as I like to call it, unfixed. We have, based on the tone of the week, the Apolitikian following God is the Lord, the Kathismata, the Anabathmi, the Prokimenon, Kontakion, and Ekos, and the hymns for the praises. Those are based on the tone of the week, while the variables are based on the Eothena cycle, Orthros Gospel reading, the Exapostolaria, and the Doxasticon, with the Catavasias and Magnificat, depending on the liturgical season, and the tone of the more honorable follows the tone of the Catavasias, which if you don't have, you need to make sure that you get right now off of the Archdiocese website, the ones that Father John wrote in all 8 modes, because they are absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, making your advertising. Thank you. Nice.
You're
I didn't
welcome.
pay him anything. I didn't pay him.
They were
Maybe
beautifully typeset as well. So that kind of leaves us with some time for any follow-up questions. Anything you want to add to close things out, Abuna?
No, I mean, it's the Orthros service. Like we said in the beginning, it's one of the most complicated. It's the most complicated service we have. I mean, we try to finish it in, 3 hours, maybe 4 hours total. But hopefully that's just something to kind of explain a little bit what it is structurally, and hopefully it pushes people to get them, explore more about it and read more about it. I think I don't know if there is a book I usually like. I like, and I usually tell people about it. It's called the Typicon Decoded. Just a beautiful book, for people who are interested, have the time, interested to read about, how Orthros came to be, different parts of it, how they came, to be, and stuff like this. It's a good book. But I just also, again, the whole thing we started in the beginning to do stuff like this, we did not want people just to be like, just like this is what they see on the liturgical guide. They're just gonna, just follow blindly in a way. I would love, always had this thing like, I want people to know, if they can learn why we do things, here's why we do things, It would be nice, not just like, why are you doing this? I don't know, I just, saw this. When I gave an example in the beginning, many weeks ago, like, if there's, we're humans, we make mistakes, we make typos. It's not like because a typo printed, it became, it becomes the law, or it becomes like, we're not going to, we just follow, we can't, not knowing if it's wrong, let's fix it, let's know it's wrong, and let's look for the right answer, So that's all I will add. There's a question. Can you briefly explain the Eothenon cycle again? From Gerald. Gerald, we have the cycle of 11 Gospels read. It's the cycle of 11 readings of the Gospel, based on the 11 appearances of Christ after his resurrection. So they are read from all the Gospels, the 4 Gospels. And, like I said, 2011, it's a rotation. There are 2 other hymns related to the Gospel, Eothenon Gospel, the Exapostolarion that we talked about, and the the Doxasticon at the end of Orthros, that they kind of shed light on, like Greg said, on the gospel reading. Is that what you're looking for, Gerald?
And their name Eothena is tied to their topic. You know, they're called the Eothena because it happens early in the morning, which we hear in the second Eothena gospel. It was early in the morning on the first day of the week when the women came to the tomb. So this became the name for that cycle in general. And they're from all four gospels. So it's any post-resurrectional account that happened in any of the four gospels. Charlie asked that he's heard about a tradition where Psalm 50 is chanted in tone 8, preceding "Open to me the doors of repentance."
Mm-hmm. You would hear that just so it's just to make it easier transition
Smooth.
To the hymns, which is, you'll see a lot of, actually, I mean, everybody agrees tone 2 is the traditional way. Tone 2 is just it is the one. But then because of this, those hymns that we sung, we chant them during Lent that they're in tone 8. There was, some compositions that have, wrote.
Popped up.
50. What is it?
They popped up.
Yeah, and that's how. But it's, I mean, nowadays, like I said, in our churches, usually we read them. And some people are very adamant about, it needs to be read, it cannot be chanted. Of course, it's up to the discretion of the priest, But if you chant it, and if you have the blessing to chant it, I would definitely learn it, Not just learn how it's usually done, look at the music, don't just if you can. St. Anthony's has, setting of, for it in tone 2, follow music, at least in the beginning, till you get a hold of it, how it's chanted.
Yeah. Sherry asks that the doxology follows the tone of the week, but tonight's example does not.
Yeah, I mean, we did talk about it, Sherry. This is traditionally what is done, that the doxology should follow the tone of the week, but we just, because of the complexity, it might bring people switching from one tone to another, and not everybody is, able to do so. In a way, the decision was made in our archdiocese, and a lot of places you see outside of our archdiocese, just to stick with the same tone as the glory, to make things easy, on the chanters. So if the glory, you'll notice that the doxology was in tone 6, because the glory was in tone 6. So if the glory is in tone 6, both now and never is in tone 6, and then the doxologies continue with the same tone to make just things easier on the chant. But traditionally, and if people can do it, and the choir can do it, if you have one, and switch all these tones to do what's traditionally done, why not? But if you can't, of course, not a problem, and that's why we make it easier on people, to leave it in the same tone as the glory, so it doesn't, bring any, agitate or discomfort, and people I'm having trouble switching, and so at least the service kind of keeps going, smooth.
I once, it was actually at Father Raphael's wedding weekend. We didn't have music for the Doxa of Pascha, and I was still learning how to chant and didn't really know what was happening. I'm still learning how to chant. I still don't really know what's happening. And the Doxasticon of the Eothena was in tone 6, and then it was time to sing the Doxa of Pascha in tone 5, and I think that I am probably the only person that's ever sung the Doxasticon of Pascha in tone 6, because I just couldn't make the switch. I just couldn't make the switch in my head, and it just came out in tone 6, and Christ is Risen was sung in tone 6, and it was terrible.
How many frustrations, and you should be, I don't know.
I did 40 a day for 40 days.
Weren't you excommunicated because of that?
Only by Father Raphael, but he was not a priest yet, so we were fine. These things happen. Sometimes mistakes happen.
And it's totally fine. It's totally fine. Just so we don't, say that we left any of the questions. I know there is a kind of pastoral question, how to increase the attendance of Orthros, I think it's a great, it's a hard task, I would say. It is a hard task because people already complain about liturgy itself, that it's long, But I think that's so unfortunate, and so sad when people can have no problem listening and watching, 4-hour, 5-hour football game or baseball games that takes hours or like many, many innings. But when it comes to like show up an hour earlier, that's somehow bad or not enough, or not good or something. I think it takes a lot of, work from the priest, It's just it's a lot of work, to educate people about the services, the importance of attendance church, the importance of like liturgy in the end. And I said that before, liturgy in the end is, it's just when you sit down to eat, at, somebody's house, the meal is ready and now you're the appetizer and all of these things. But Orthros is like when you don't show up at somebody's house who invited you for lunch or dinner, and you just show up the second they put the food on the table. Right. So you get before to get to know them, talk to them, and that's why Orthros is important. So at least you know what's happening in liturgy. Why are you celebrating liturgy for? In liturgy, you're going to have those maybe 2.5 hymns that tells you about the feast. But in the end of the day, it's Orthros where actually you get to know that about the feast, about every single detail. Same thing when you go to somebody's house, you get to know them. You're busy eating. You're not going to be busy asking them how their family is and how they're doing with work and how they're doing with their life because you're busy eating, And after the food, you're most likely ready to sleep and take a nap. So of course you're not going to be focused, having conversation, like deep conversation, if I can say. It's just before you show up an hour before somebody's house or 2 hours, and you get to talk to them and get to know them. And then because of building this relationship, you kind of finish it with the liturgy and communion, with the meal. And same thing, with Orthros and, liturgy. So I was actually, one time, I show up to a church back when I was a deacon with His Eminence. I don't want to say where, but God bless them. It's one of my favorite churches that I've been to. I was just surprised. I was like, am I really seeing what I'm really seeing? Where Orthros, I don't know, almost everybody was on Orthros right from the beginning. I didn't see a difference how you see usually in our churches. Orthros, like as Sarah said, maybe you'll have 1 or 2 people, the priest and the chanter, maybe in an altar boy, and then during liturgy, all of a sudden you'll see from nobody to like all of a sudden you have like 200 people extra all of a sudden. But at that church that I was, you never felt the difference. They were very committed. They came from the beginning, and I felt so. It just made me so happy. It takes a lot of work to teach people, and people need to be dedicated. Understand the importance of these services, and God help our priests. Try to convey, this message to people to come. I don't know. It is definitely a tough task to bring people. In the old country, you see the same problem. Mostly, ladies and show up from the beginning, and then toward the end of Orthros and liturgy, then you'll see this gap. This kind of influx. I don't know if that's the right word. Like all of a sudden, like boom, many people show up. And I don't know, maybe in the old country, they take a lot of things for granted. Yeah, we've been to church many times. Yeah, it's down the street. I'll come back next week. Or I'll come back tomorrow and light a candle if I have to, And somehow, like, it's spilled here in the States. And, we take a lot of things for granted, But sometimes, especially with COVID and stuff, at least personally, I get to learn. I've never in my life was not in church, at least on Sundays. Like, I was like 4 or 5 Sundays in a row, no church. That's never happened. It was killing me from the inside. It was and it got me to think how much I have to appreciate more and more, any second I spend in church. But we just have to, pray for these people, and do as much as we can, teach and try to, convey the real message of Orthros and importance of these services. And Vespers too, What's wrong if in the end, look at it. Look at Orthros an hour. Or Vespers an hour, not even 45 minutes, and liturgy an hour. I mean, can't you not spare 3 hours a week? 3 hours a week just for church. I mean, I understand when you live an hour away, or I mean, there are a lot of things also that stop, very hard, but no excuse for the people who live close to the church, or they have the opportunity, they can do that, especially when they're spending way more time, like I said, watching games, or they go actually watch games, in the stadium, and they drive whatever it takes and do whatever it takes, Um, but it's like sometimes we have double standards when it comes to church stuff, unfortunately. But anyway, that's at least what I don't know if Greg can, Greg, want to add something about this?
What I've noticed here in the parish here is that the more that we challenge people, lovingly, to be there, the more that they are able to come, and they're making it a priority. When I got here, and this is definitely not anything I've done. I give all the credit. Father Chris, who's the parish priest here, does a really good job of really challenging people. Um, when I moved here about 6 years ago, there were maybe like 10 people or so in Orthros. And by the time we're done with Orthros, we've got a good 50, 60 people in the church, which is a start. It's everything is just a start. We had one guy that his brother-in-law was visiting, and his brother-in-law wanted to be there for Orthros, and he came to drop his brother-in-law off, and he said, I didn't realize there was church before church. And then he said, and this was the most beautiful part, I really like church before church. It's really nice. It's really peaceful. It's really beautiful. And so he started getting there earlier and earlier and earlier. And really, just once people start to see what's going on, it happens. And the more that we, you know, the church is God's house. God is everywhere, but the church is his house. So the more that we are able to get people to his house where he does his business best, where he's most comfortable, the better it is. And we see what God is able to do in people's lives. Because if we think that we're going to do it, then we're just going to keep bashing our heads against the wall, because it's never going to work, because it's not about us. It's ultimately about what is God doing in people's lives.
I can tell you this story told by a priest. He was invited. He's from the Boston area, and he had a problem. Not a problem, but like there was one family that always shows up late to church. Sometimes a few minutes before communion, sometimes right after gospel, or like it's just always like, why just don't you come? And they can. It's not like God, they have like little kids or something that is such a struggle. They can. It takes just decision to wake up earlier and get ready. But they actually have season tickets for the Red Sox. So one time they invited the priest to come to one of the games. So he made it on purpose. They told him, let's show up and eat first in one of the restaurants, and then we go to the game. And then what he did it on purpose, where he did not show up, to get food, to eat food with them. And then he only showed up like third or fourth inning or something in the game. When he showed up, they were just upset. They were furious, like, Abuna, we waited for you for dinner. We waited, in the end, like even they dared to tell him, like, it cost them, those tickets are not cheap, and all of these things. And he's like, well, okay, you never show up to church on time. You always like complain, or you just complain now to me about this, but like, you want me to start complaining about you not showing up, at least in the beginning of liturgy, let alone Orthros, And guess what? After that, they learned their lesson, and now they're one of the first families, he said, that they show up to Orthros and then liturgy, because they didn't want to be those, holding like double standards, where they, it's all right for them to be late on stuff that they maybe don't like, they're not very interested in a way, but they want people to love and come on time for things that they want, So he played it very well. I mean, maybe it would have, got them even, thank God it didn't get them upset and they just left the church because the priest, insulted them by not showing up, but at least they learned the lesson, They learned the lesson.
Excellent. That's an awesome story.
And Chris, yeah, what you said, some people not showing up or Orthros just because they couldn't, instead of liturgy. I mean, yeah, once you show up to Orthros and listen to those hymns and see what's happening and learn more about the faith, and especially and chant will help tremendously. How to get people, hooked on it, will definitely make a difference. And a lot of times, like Greg said, people just don't know more about it. That's why I think one of the ways, if the church can offer it, Orthros during the week, once or twice a week, where they can just say, you know what, we're doing daily Orthros on, Wednesday, Monday, whatever it is. And that might also give an opportunity for people to show up, because like, oh, it's church and I can make, I can come. But then they might hopefully get them to start thinking of coming, on Sunday too.
It's awesome.
Also, Abigail, I'm just reading some of the comments just in case we have to answer. Some of the inquiries tend to arrive right on time for Orthros, not knowing that it's different from the divine liturgy. Try to, yeah, I mean, one of the things, a lot of people say, they broadcast on their, advertise for their church is basically, oh, church is at 9. A lot of people think like, oh, liturgy is at 9. So they just don't know. They assume, and then they show up, it's like 9. So that, Orthros is, so we have to wait till 10. Some people feel like embarrassed. They don't want to leave. So they sit. So some actually will stay in. Some next week they know we're not going to make the same mistake. So we're actually going to show up at 10 instead. But some people actually come and, like it, and they come back again,
The other thing that often helps is daylight savings time, which is coming up. When people forget to change their clock, now with cell phones as alarm clocks, it doesn't happen as often, but the clocks would always get, when I was a kid, clocks wouldn't get changed. People would show up for Orthros. Sometimes they'd be real mad, but they'd always stay and they'd always like the service. Whether or not they kept coming is a whole nother issue.
Yeah. And Michael, right, like that's what basically some priests do, that services start at 8, That's it. People think it's the divine liturgy because that's the only thing they know, or that's the only thing they want to know, And you see that a lot of times, unfortunately, in some of the like churches, especially Greek churches, and some Antiochians, more than the Greek churches, but you'll see it in the Antiochian churches in the Old Country, where on Holy Thursday, because it's somehow communion is more like different or like more holy or holier. So they would call churches just to ask, what time is communion? So they want to get from the priest or the secretary, okay, so you're saying online that liturgy starts at 10. When is that put communion? Around like what time? So like 10:45, 10:50, should I show up? It's something very common. You would hear from, I hear from my brothers, the priests in the Greek Archdiocese on Holy Thursday, because somehow a lot of those people, only take communion once a year, or maybe a couple times a year. One of those, time is Holy Thursday, because somehow it is holier, or somehow it has a different taste, communion, or a different impact, maybe. I don't know, that's what they think. But they would want to only show up at what time, liturgy only. They want to show up around communion, That's like, what are you going to do? You're going to pray for these people.
Some churches during Holy Thursday even have a priest off to the side that's just giving communion while liturgy is going on. So people just come in, take communion, and leave. As the whole liturgy is just rolling on beyond them, and then they'll stay for a couple hours afterwards for people that come in. I think it comes from the Ottoman Empire, from when the schools were closed and priests weren't allowed to hear confession. And so they would all go to communion on Holy Thursday because they had Holy Unction, which got added into Holy Week, so that people could at least take communion during Holy Thursday and Holy Saturday and on Pascha. Because unction has the absolution at the end of it. So that's why it exists in Holy Week. It's not a Holy Week service. But that's a whole nother story.
Sure. Well, that's very interesting.
Because it's only in the Byzantine practice where the Ottomans closed all the schools, i.e. the Greek churches, the Antiochian, where there were not seminaries open, so they weren't allowed to hear confession. So all of the ties. Anyway, it's a whole nother story.
But the problem is, we don't have any Ottoman Empire anymore, and
Nope.
we don't have these restrictions. If we can come to church for take communion, what's the
And we
point
can
of
come to church to take confession.
Oh, well, that's another whole another whole thing. Off-topic question: do we have recordings of major feasts of the Antiochian Church somewhere online? We'd love to improve. You mean just like specific hymns, Maya, or just like the whole service? To answer you, at least there is. I mean, our next project after we finish music, at least like writing the music for a lot of the stuff that we still want to write for. Mostly the odes, the longer pieces of music. Yeah, I mean, the next goal after we finish writing the music or editing or fixing the music that we really want to make sure that it's available. That's the second goal, is to record them. To offer recordings, like basic recordings. They don't have to be professional or anything like this, but like to help people who don't read music, or if they can read music, but some of the hymns are complicated. And we've done at least some, with some of the very complicated, like the glories and stuff like this, that we offer recordings so you can listen to. But hopefully after we're done writing the music or editing music for the hymns that we really want to finish and make sure we have them available, that will be our next goal. I think up to now, we have around in the last 4.5 years that we've been doing like solid Byzantine chant stuff. We've done, around 2,000 or 1,500 links at least, of links of like hymns in Byzantine. And one link can have one hymn, or it can have a whole service. So this is something very important, but we still need some time, because none of us do it as the 4 or 5 people that work on this. It's not their full-time job. It's like we do that, beside what other stuff we do. And like people said, some hymns are already online, like you can find them. Some individuals that recorded things here and there. St. Anthony's have done a few things, also have recordings, but a lot of times they have different translation, hymns in different translation than what we use. And some stuff, anyway, we're trying, at least at the Sacred Music, the Byzantine Committee, we're trying to do, recordings for the hymns that we post on the liturgical guide. So either it's Kazan's text, or a Nasser text, or text from HTM that we've brought, or whatever it is. But that's basically the goal. After we finish writing the music that we need to write, we'll basically start just recording these things. And have not only the hyperlink to get you to the music, but next to it an MP3 or an MP4 link, or where you can press on it to hear a live person singing it. God willing. We're step by step, taking us some time, but God willing, step by step. Anyway, any other questions? Anything else? Or Chris has to.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Mm-hmm. Da-da-da-da. Should have like a music, some like theme music or something.
We need a theme song.
We do need a theme song. I'll give you that. So apparently I'm getting to be predictable, but I'll go ahead and take the floor here for a few minutes. As always, thank you to both of our presenters. I think that everybody's done a great job with this whole series, whether it's the what to sing and chant, or whether it's the the chanting in tone 1, or music theory, Western music theory. I think everybody's done a great job, and I for one really appreciate it. So thank you, gentlemen, for all the work that you've clearly put into this. It's for all of our benefit, so thanks.
It's our duty. It's our duty, and I'm sorry, we should probably in 2 weeks, God willing, we're going to start with the first part of Divine Liturgy, right, Greg? We still have our last 2 sessions about the Divine Liturgy.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to add on to that, so we do have sessions pretty much every week going up through the end of the year, and then we'll announce what we're going to be doing in the spring, because it'll likely be some additional topics just like what we're doing here. We're working on coming up with those topics right now. So as Father John mentioned, 2 weeks from now we start Divine Liturgy. That'll be broken up into 2 sessions as well. So part 1 and part 2. That makes sense. However, next week we will have we'll be leading into Tone 5, which is that coming weekend. Charlie Marge will be with us, and he's waving at you. He'll be presenting on Tone 5. He'll talk about both the Ermologic and the Sticheraric Tone 5. So we are extremely excited about that. That's going to be a great presentation. So we do have quite a bit going on in the next few weeks. The other thing that I would mention, for those of you who are not on the private Facebook group or who are not on the email list, please let me know. I'll be happy to put you on there. We announced this past week that we will be doing a concert for the Nativity. And that'll probably be, we're thinking it's going to be that week of Christmas. Christmas is on Friday night, and we're probably going to do it earlier that week. What we would really like to do is to live stream it to the Antiochian.org page, so that we're opening it up to everybody in the archdiocese to appreciate this. Marina, who she just shared her camera. Hi, Marina. So Marina has put together a virtual choir. It's actually 4-part choral version of the Exapostolarian for the Nativity of Christ. It's in Byzantine tone 3, Exapostolarian tone. However, it is a 4-part choral, and so people have been submitting their videos on that, and we've got a lot going on with that. The thing that we just announced, though, is that we're also going to have the parishes have the opportunity to send in recordings of what their parishes have done in previous concerts, or some people might actually be able to record things. We'll just see how that works out. We want both choral and we want Byzantine music for the Nativity. We want this to represent our archdiocese and all the different facets of our archdiocese. Our sacred music is pretty broad in the Antiochian Archdiocese of North America, so we want to make sure that everything is represented. If you or your parish or a group of people in your parish have recordings doing music for the Nativity, please contact Marina directly, and I can put her, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get her email address into the chat that quickly, because I'll have to look it up.
Sacred music at Antiochian.org. That's all it is.
Okay. So if you are interested in submitting something, please let her know. I did put it in the chat. Whew, thanks for speaking there, Marina. You gave me a chance to type. So please send her an email and let her know what you have and what you'd be interested in submitting. We don't want to have a bunch of repeats. I mean, not that there'll probably be a bunch of repeats, but we're going to try to make sure to coordinate that. So please talk to Marina about that as soon as you can. Let her know what you have, and then we can work on getting that submitted. And Jason Balanis, who is one of our parishioners up in St. George in Montreal, is putting that together for us so that we can have a nice concert from all over the archdiocese for all of us in the archdiocese. This year more than ever, we really need to bring our people together, and the department's really working hard to try to do our part for that. So if you have the ability, absolutely, please contact her and submit something. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about that, Marina?
No, we just want to really be able to get every church from all over our archdiocese to do something if we can. It'd be so fantastic. It'll be a great concert. And we'd love to have just everything we can. Byzantine, 4-part, everything that we can put together. Does not have to be liturgical. It can be paraliturgical. Some wonderful Christmas carols, if you will, from different regions and different traditions. It would be just fantastic. And we really want to be able to feature as many churches as we possibly can. So please talk to your directors if you are not already the director, and let them know that that's what's going on if they haven't heard already. And I also, while I'm talking, just want to thank everybody for doing this again. And it's such a beautiful situation. I wasn't visible the whole time, but I've been listening, and I learned so much all the time. Thank you, Father John and Greg, and of course, Chris, for being there and monitoring everything. We really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marina. I think that's all that I had. Presenters, any last second things you want to mention?
Nope. Looking forward to, I always say it's our duty, to offer whatever we can offer to teach. I know somebody just asked, can we do more music in spring? There are many things God willing, that we can offer just step by step. I think it was very important for us to offer these things, what to chant in a way, before we kind of start going in, more into how we chant and stuff like this. So I promise you that won't be the last thing we do, So again, if it's our duty to help. If we can, always look at the parable of the talent. Even the one who kept it, who didn't even lose the talent, and look what happened to him. He didn't even lose it. I mean, what would happen if he lost it? If somehow he won't even, he stopped completely doing whatever. Anyway, the point is, if we're given talent, we have to offer, we have to help and teach. So God willing, we'll keep doing these till we're done.
Ditto.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Thanks everyone for participating, for all your great questions. Again, to our speakers who have done a fantastic job. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week with Chanting in Tone 5 with Charlie.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Good night.
Great job. Yeah, you're on mute, Chris.
Sorry, that was awesome. Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah.
All right. I am going to work with Marina and whoever else. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not going to be able to stay through your whole presentation next weekend or next Tuesday. I have actually a rehearsal, so I'm going to be tied up. It actually starts at 7, so I'm probably going to log in early, and then make somebody else like Marina or whatever the host or whoever can do it. So I'll work on that, and I'll definitely let you know who's going to be working with you next week.
Okay, it's great. And when you can get it, because I want to work on this weekend, when you can get it to me, the video from the Tone 5 classes, what you think the latest materials are, so that I can make sure you do get the latest and greatest.
I have the videos on YouTube, so I can either give you the YouTube link or I can actually upload like the actual.
No, the YouTube link should be fine, right? That's what I played last time, right? Yeah, just send me the links for those, and send me what you think the latest materials are, because I know I corrected one of them after the fact, and I just want to make sure that the correction is in there, that we're not sending out maybe what was initially sent out for the last class, which we had to correct later.
Sure.
And also, seeing the video itself, it'll allow me, because there was one thing that was sung in error, it'll allow me to just do that part in live, so that I can skip that part. So that's why, the sooner I can look that over, the sooner I'll be able to plan that out.
Hey, Chris.
Yes, ma'am.
Chris, I can help out on Tuesday, no problem.
Okay, perfect.
That's
All right,
great,
I'll coordinate
Marina.
with you.
Thanks, Marina.
Okay. Of course.
Yeah, and you got my 2 emails last night, right, Marina?
Yeah, I got them this morning, and I've been just on go mode all day, so I will get to them later.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure you got them. All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Are we the only ones on right now? Because I can't see because
just
I'm
the 3 of us.
driving.
Yep, it's just the 3 of us.
Okay, so can I just ask you then real quick, instead of typing a whole bunch of questions,
Sure.
about the thing that Nick Zane, or whatever
Yeah.
his name is, Zane
Right.
sent? So yeah, I was wondering, I mean, it's very cool. I don't think they're gonna send us, that they are planning to send us that video. They're going to sing it, but it doesn't
Oh.
have anything to do with, I just asked him to send me a link so that I could, because I didn't know what the heck he was talking about.
Oh.
Um, but it has nothing to do with the
It really
nativity, right?
it really doesn't, in my
It's just
opinion.
the
I mean,
doxology.
yeah. Well, yeah, and it's not even. You see, the funny thing is that there is a special doxology that you do on Christmas where the last hymn of the both now, which is the one he's referring to in tone 2, there's a tradition to, when you get to the part of the hymn that says glory to God in the highest, you cut straight to the doxology and you start it with glory to God in the highest, as opposed to glory to thee who has shown us the light. And we recorded that. You have that because we recorded that on our CD that we released last
Okay.
year. But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about that hymn and a doxology that follows. But I think his argument's a little bit weaker in that he's saying that hymn's in tone 2, and a lot of people like to do this other doxology because it's in a chromatic type tone. It's in tone 8, but it's still chromatic somehow. And yeah, and it's really cool. My concern is that there's nothing about that doxology, the Hijaz car, that necessarily says Christmas about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's yeah,
Okay.
like what I recorded, you could make the argument because it shows that last long, both now him going into a doxology in a cool manner and in a particular style that's different. You know, it was a triple meter that we recorded and all that. I could have sent you that one for my concert, by the way, and I chose not to because I thought it was too long, which is another issue with what he's suggesting there.
Yeah, that was long.
Yeah,
Ooh.
it's 9 minutes. It's 9 minutes. So I would ask him if he has, and plus it wasn't clear to me, was he going to be doing it in English? Does he have a Hijaz Qadr version that's in English? In any event, it's way too long. So I would ask him if there's something else that he could do if he's going to be recording something with his chanters for Christmas. There's something else that he could do for the nativity that he could offer for this. That was more where the words of the hymn are more specific to the nativity, whereas you're right, the great doxology, there's nothing specific to Christmas in that.
Okay. Other than the fact that it's done.
Other
But
than
it has nothing to,
and that the second phrase is, or in the middle of the first phrase, you hear glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill among men, which is what the angels were saying. But we do that every Sunday, you know. So.
right. Okay. All right. I will try to word it as gently as I can. But maybe and Chris Howard, you're still here.
Yes.
Maybe we need to put a parameter. Maybe it's time now that we've got all of the voices in, because I did a massive push on Saturday. I was on the phone all day long, either doing texting or Facebook or emailing or whatever. We got about another 20 people to turn in their stuff because we had a stupid number of like 28 sopranos, 14 altos, 9 tenors, and 10 basses. It was like, come on. So I just put everybody on task and got a whole bunch of them in tonight, or this as of yesterday.
Well,
So we're done.
Well, you're not, because Stratus just sent a message to his choir because I'm on his list because it's my mom's church. And he just sent a message today to people asking them to send in parts that weren't soprano. So
Oh, Lord have mercy. Okay.
he said they really need more tenors and basses. As of course, as there are 60 singers so far and 30 are sopranos. Altos, we could use some of you also. So you might get a few more that come in. Who knows?
Okay, do you have the ability to do a reply all with that?
I do.
I just talked to Marina, and she said that all recordings have to be in by tomorrow night. That is a hard cutoff.
Okay. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, we've got to stop because we've got to be able to move on to the new game plan. You know, the new
Right.
situation,
Right.
and Jason's got to be able to have a stopping place where he can. Because right now, he's tonight we're meeting in 6 minutes. Doing just the Sopranos. We're gonna talk about the Sopranos and reordering them and whatever. And we're doing that specifically because I told him, I said I'm gonna go look for some